Welcome. Oh, it does work pretty well. That's great. So I feel like I have to bend down, but I think I'm okay. Welcome. It's wonderful to see all you here. Some of my fellow folks up here are going to tell you exactly why we're here and what we're doing, but I want to just welcome you on behalf of Coming to the Table, RVA, Richmond, and kind of give you a little background. I see a lot of familiar faces out here, but I see some that I don't know so well, so we'll give you a little background about what Coming to the Table is. Coming to the Table is a national organization that's been around for a while. The vision of Coming to the Table is for a just and truthful society that acknowledges and seeks to heal from the racial wounds of the past, from slavery and its legacy and aftermath. And what we try to do in the places where we are, like this city, is provide leadership, resources, and a supportive environment for all who wish to acknowledge and heal from the wounds that are rooted in America's history of slavery. I want to, I was talking with some folks from Maryland who do workshops for, diversity workshops, and they were very interested in our work at Coming to the Table because there's not a lot of organizations that seek to do sustained work around these issues. You can go to a 2-day thing, you can go to this or that, but we are an organization that seeks to be in the long fight and struggle to deal with this and to heal from our past. And we do that through 4 legs of our table. One is uncovering history. So just like this event tonight, we seek to find research and all kinds of ways to look truthfully at our history and look at it with openness and honesty. We try to make connections. So we have all kinds of ways, if you look on our Facebook page, and all kinds of avenues for you to make connections with folks who are initially committing to this work, at least, and maybe some who've been doing it for a long time. We seek to work towards healing, exploring how we can heal together through dialogue, reunion, ritual, meditation, prayer, ceremony, the arts, apology, in all kinds of ways. And then we seek to take action, actively seeking to dismantle the systems of racial inequality, injustice, and oppression, and work to transform our nation. So thank you for being here, and I look forward to seeing you at some Coming to the Table event in the future as well.
And I'm Arthur Rollins, and Danita and I were co-founders of the Richmond Table. Many years ago, we have some stories, so come sit with us sometimes and hear the stories. When a white capitalist and
a black queen.
A black queen we're. So I have such exciting news really today, and I wanted to just share it with this group of folks because you've come out tonight. The reason we've grown to become the largest Coming to the Table local chapter in the country is because of the hard work of so many of our volunteers. And so if you're a volunteer, I would love for you to raise or stand up, and you've done, there's some of you not even put up with some. Thank you. And we keep getting more and more need to grow. And Danita has a real job that has to pay her rent, and it doesn't work when it's just a white woman, doing it's a white woman and a white man ready to go there. Anyway, so we decided to incorporate and to become a nonprofit and to be able to raise funds so that we can pay this lady as the CEO. I'm the co-CEO working free because we try to do everything modeling the co-ness because we each bring different gifts to the table. So we're announcing that tonight, and we got that. We're so excited! And we got a bank account, and we got our first donation, and it's like, and we have a person who's given us a substantial challenge grant. So if you just feel blessed or you feel either guilty because you want to do something because you made all your money on plantations, us white folks have the privilege to say it aloud and everything. No attempt to make, we really don't try to make that. I'm just sort of laughing, because we laugh about some of the truths that are so painful we don't know exactly how to approach them. I'm actually a relative of both Robert E. Lee and Jeb Stuart.
And I'm not.
But someday I'm going to find out that I'm kin to Anita. Anyway, my timer is calling, but I just wanted to share that good news with you, and just ask that you keep us in your thoughts. And Darren, who just spoke, is the chairman of the board.
Yes.
We're excited.
Yes. And as she said, I'm Danita Green, or some people say I'm the other Martha Rollins. And she's the other Danita Green. But thank you all for coming tonight. I've been given the arduous job of answering the question, why we're here. So I don't know if you all have noticed, but a lot of the presidential nominees, or the would-bes, are talking about reparations. And we actually have been talking about it and coming to the table far longer than anybody else. And we wanted to be able to spend this year specifically, as we celebrate our growth and as the flagship chapter of Coming to the Table, to lead the march on defining what reparations is. So in the straight vernacular, it means to repair. It means to repair what is broken. And so, yes, that does mean maybe some money down the road, but long before we get there, we have to repair our foundation, where we started in this country. That is actually what is broken. Ashe? Ashe. So tonight, I'm hoping that you will have your hearts and minds open to experience something new that we all at Coming to the Table know is very possible. We want you to keep your hearts and minds open to a possibility of something that we have never, ever experienced in the United States. That is total equality between races here in the land that we all hold dear. I want you to open your hearts and minds to the notion that maybe reparations is not just a good thing for Black people. It's a good thing for all people. If we can go back and reset our moral compass and see each other in the eyes of each other, we would have a totally different nation that would actually live up to the words that our founding fathers wrote, but never truly understood. So I know that we have gotten to time, but I want you all to just vision for a moment, what is it that you really want for this nation, for your communities and your families? And then as we move forward in this work, just think, in order to gain all of that wonderfulness and that new humanity, the new United States, the new United States, what would you have to give up to get there? Would you have to cross a line to talk to somebody at work? Would you have to apologize for something that you may have done or someone did generations ago? Think about what you are willing to do and contemplate what the reward could possibly be, not just for yourself, but for the generations to come. Now we have a panel tonight of some very talented people. I'm going to be one of those. But before then, we are going to have a wonderful presentation by the man who wrote this book, The Road to Healing, a civil rights reparations story in Prince Edward County, Virginia. And his name is Ken Woodley, and he's sitting down here. And this is the first time I've met you in person, right?
Absolutely.
But we had a long talk over the phone a few weeks ago, and I feel like I know you. Now, I could read about you in this book jacket, but I know a lot of that you're going to say. So this is what I'm going to say that I know about you. Ken, I see you as a man who loves the state where you live. You love Virginia. You are the kind of man that's able to look out beyond the rhetoric, beyond what people say right here in front of you, and see the full picture of what we all could be. You are also a line crosser, and that's what I like about you. Somebody that's willing to stand up and say, not only this is wrong, but I can do something to make it right. You were able to see something that was broken and take a stand right where you were to repair it. So, without further ado, I want to introduce my new friend, author Ken Woodley.
Well, that's the best introduction I've ever had. Nothing could top that. I am honored and humbled to be here tonight for this truly important occasion. I want to thank Coming to the Table for inviting me, and the Virginia Museum of History and Culture for accommodating us all. Now, some of you may have noticed that I'm not wearing dress shoes. And that is because the road to healing is real, it is long, it is hard. We walk it together, and that means whether it's hiking boots or sneakers or track shoes, you got to be determined and you must be committed. The road to healing is a story of hope. It's a story of redemption. It's a story of faith. It's a story of muscular idealism. And thankfully, it's a true story. It's a true story. And the fact that it is true applies to this organization and what it hopes to achieve, because Julian Bond told me back in May of 2015, he looked at me, he was the commencement speaker at Longwood University, and Viola, I believe you were sitting at the table with us as a member of the Virginia House of Delegates. And he said, if you're successful in doing this, and this is the Brown Scholarships, it will create the first civil rights era reparations in U.S. history. So that happened. It happened in the former capital of the Confederacy. It happened with a deeply divided General Assembly, the Democratic Governor Mark Warner, and the House and the Senate controlled by Republicans. It was such a divisive session of the General Assembly because of the budget crisis that Mark Warner inherited, that the Republicans in the House couldn't get along with the Republicans in the Senate. They could not agree on how to proceed. The Senate was more inclined to follow the recommendations of Governor Warner. The House, absolutely no. Now, I was born in Farmville, Virginia, but that was fate or luck, only because my mother and father got married really early. They eloped. She had me when she was 18. My father was a student at Hampton-Sydney College in Prince Edward County. And I was born there, lived there the first 2 years of my life. My father graduated. Both mom and dad were from Richmond. So they packed up about the very week that Prince Edward County voted to defund public education and moved back to Richmond, where I was raised, where I grew up. Now, I had to return to Hampton-Sydney. I had to return to Prince Edward County. I was born there. I had to go back because Hampton-Sydney was the only college that would have me. I applied to JMU, to UVA, and to Virginia Tech. No, no, and no. And Hampton-Sydney wasn't even my third favorite choice. So I was born there. I had to come back. Then after graduation, the only job offer I had was at the Farmville Herald, so I couldn't leave. And I graduated from college absolutely certain, this idealistic English major, that I was going to get a job at a big daily newspaper. I was going to write the great American novel, and that was going to be it. You know, it's all going to be this magic carpet ride. 36 years later, I retired from the Farmville Herald. And looking back at how I was born there, how I had to come back, and I couldn't leave, it felt like a greater hand than mine. And all through this story, or any story of meaningful healing, God is with us. And that is something we really need to remember. But I had no idea that Prince Edward County had closed schools. Like I said, I went to college there for 4 years, knew nothing, never heard of massive resistance. I got a job at the Farmville Herald. I had no idea that they were the loudest, most vehement public supporter for shutting down schools. Did so on its editorial pages. I was in the newsroom. It was in the first year I was working at the Herald, and a Hampton-Sydney professor's wife came up to the newsroom, and she looked at me, and her eyes were throwing very sharp daggers and anything else she could think of to hit me where I lived. And finally she looked at me and said, "You know what happened here, don't you?" And I said, "No, I have no idea what you're talking about." And she said, "Go to Longwood College's rare book room," now Longwood University, it was Longwood College then, "and ask for this book, They Closed Their Schools, by Bob Smith." She threw another couple of daggers at me and left, and I had to find out. I left in her wake. It was just a few blocks up to Longwood in the library. I went in the rare book room. I asked for the book. You couldn't check it out because it was rare. So I can see it as if it was this afternoon. I sat in a chair to the left of the door. The title of the book told me something. It didn't tell me where or by whom. I started flipping through the pages, and I began to feel numb. I began to feel sick because I started recognizing names. I started seeing the Farmville Herald on many pages. I started seeing the name J. Barry Wall Sr. on many pages. I began seeing the last name Wall on many pages. And that same family owned the newspaper. That same man was still the publisher. That same man was still writing editorials. And I understood what that professor's wife thought. She thought, he knows what happened. He knows what side they were on. And he's here because he has willingly joined their team. What she didn't know was that I felt at that moment that life had parachuted me behind enemy lines, both into a community that could do that to its children, could defund public education for 5 years. I mean, 5 minutes would have been too long. And also at that newspaper, because its position on massive resistance was so contrary to how I felt. In the book, I've tried to get to the root of my racial sensibilities, and I just am blessed. I thank God that I've always just seen people as people. I drove past Thomas Jefferson High School today. I encountered all these no left turns as I was trying to get into here, and I found myself in front of TJ again. And in 8th and 9th grade, there was the court-ordered busing for desegregation, and I went from a virtually 100% white public school environment up to that time until it pretty much flipped. My schools were about 90% African American and about 10% white. And that experience confirmed what I'd always felt. I mean, it was my black classmates that stood up for me against white bullies. And that's just the way it was. But there was no immediate epiphany that I was going to stay in Farmville and try and right a wrong. That was a gradual understanding. I thought the history was over and done, but of course it's not. We are in a continuum. We are in the continuing successive chapters being written. And when I realized that, and when I lucked out somehow and became editor, I grabbed that pulpit and I held on tight, and I knew what I wanted to do. I never ever thought it would lead to something like the Brown Scholarships, which came about because two other good things were happening. We're in a relay of light, and that's why I wear these shoes too. The General Assembly in 2003 was talking about adopting a resolution of its profound regret and apology for the closing of schools in Prince Edward County and the state's role in that. And Linwood Davis, Latin teacher in Prince Edward County High School, had asked the school board to think about awarding honorary diplomas to those locked out of school, because over 2,000 African American children in Prince Edward County were left without a formal education. Those two ideas flowed together in my head. I would have been thinking about something else that day, but for what those two good things that were happening. But boom, popped into my head, state-funded scholarship program for those individuals that would go GED all across, all the way up to a master's degree. And the book tells that story, which was perilous. Well, I want to say something. I know I'm running out of time here. There are hate groups all around us. There are hate groups. I don't know that they're more than there used to be, but they're louder because they have felt empowered by the President of the United States. And we need love groups. We need love groups. Coming to the table is a love group. I'm not talking about hippie, pie in the sky love. I'm talking about muscular idealism. I'm talking about the love that Jesus said God is love. And so if you're in line with that power, you got real power. I'm talking about the love that Martin Luther King said that darkness cannot defeat darkness, only light can, and hate cannot defeat hate, only love can. It's that kind of love. It's the kind of love a parent feels for a child, that you would give anything. You will persevere. The past has been written by others. It's gone, but we know how hard it is to correct what others have done before us. We would not be here in this room having this conversation if 400 years ago certain ships had not come to Jamestown, if there had not been actions, slavery, segregation, Jim Crow, everything across the board that became part of our past, that is still informing our present. Those are tributaries into the river that we live now, and that water is still with us. Tomorrow is going to be written by somebody else. This moment is ours. This moment is ours. It's the only chance we have. And even one small course correction over a long journey can bring about important change. What I want us to do is make it damn hard for people 50 or 100 or 150 years from now to undo what we are in the midst of doing on this road of healing that we all share. Thank you very much.
Check. Okay. Thank you, Ken. I appreciate that. We have just a few minutes, very few.
We didn't take all this time, so.
Oh, well,
if there are questions.
don't tell them that. But I'm willing to move around with this microphone if there are a few questions. If anyone has a question for Ken. Oh.
If that's somebody else. So I heard you before, and I really loved how you shared how you accomplished with others getting the legislation passed. Can you tell us a little bit about that, what you did, how it was passed?
I was trying to see how.
It was February 18th, 2003. And before lunch that day, Viola Baskerville had promised to be the chief patron sponsor for the legislation in the House of Delegates in 2004. It was the middle of the session in 2003, so it was too late for that. And the late Senator Benjamin Lambert had promised to do the same in the Senate. It would have been a sin in my eyes for me to have simply written an editorial the next day in a community so deeply wounded as Prince Edward County, where there have been so many prayers for something to happen, for me just to float an idea and say, why doesn't the state do this? I didn't write about it for fully 1 month, because when I wrote about it in that community, especially after hearing from John Stokes, who was one of Barbara Johns' key lieutenants, I called him that morning too, and his reaction took me way deep. So when I wrote about what became the Brown Scholarship Program, I could tell the people who had been wounded, that we had a fighting chance, that there would be legislation, that we would fight for it. It's not just an idea, it's something that we're going to work toward. And fortunately, I had a good relationship with Mark Warner from before he was elected governor, and I was familiar with key members of his administration from past activities, so I could call his press secretary, Ellen Qualls, on the phone as I did and say, Ellen, I've got an idea I want to bounce off the governor. Can you ask him to call me? And he called me at the Farmville Herald, and I introduced him to this reparations idea. And if the legislative path had been a roller coaster at an amusement park, it never would have passed the safety inspection. No one would have been allowed to ride it. Because at one point, for example, you had the House of Delegates that said the only way we'll ever support it is if it doesn't receive a penny in state funds. At the same time, the Senate was saying the only way we'll ever support it is if it has state funds. But even the Senate didn't want to give it anything but peanuts. So it was like a phoenix that died and rose up 3 or 4 times during the course of that legislative session. But all along, because I had learned from an experience back in 1999 that miracles can happen on veto day, that's 6 weeks after the Virginia General Assembly shuts down shop, they all get back together in Richmond to consider gubernatorial vetoes and amendments. So I began working on Mark Warner months in advance of that, because I could sort of tell where we were headed in the regular session. And every time something needed to happen, something happened, and that's God at work. I tell people who want to say, well, you did all that, you did this. No, God was the wave. I just did the best I could to hang on to the surfboard, and lots of times I fell off. But at the end, the last month, I spent 4 weeks going after Republicans with what I call aggressive affection. Because, and that's what we need to do. We all need to do, because I knew back then in 2004 that it would not be as deep a healing as it could be and should be if it narrowly passed with just a few Republicans supporting it. No. I didn't want people in Prince Edward County to read a headline, the General Assembly narrowly passes the Brown scholarships. I wanted us all, and I told Republicans that. I told them that. And I think we need to call people up before we call them out, because we need to give them a chance to come together and be a part of it. That way you can win, you can cross the finish line together. It's no good to make a dramatic stand and fail. However glorious you may look as an individual in failing, you need to put all that aside and bring everybody to the table. That way everybody gets fed.
Amen.
Yeah. You come.
How are you doing?
I'm doing fine. Thank you, sir. You mentioned that 2,000 African Americans lost their access to public education at that time. And has anybody researched, and I know you have, what happened to those 2,000 lives? And also, I heard you speak before, and I hope that you can give us an experience that you had. I remember you talked about a gentleman that you had, a relationship with. So those are my questions.
There's going to be a really good book coming out sometime in the next 6 months by Rita Odom Mosley, who was locked out of school. She's in this book, and she has interviewed as many of those individuals, the African Americans locked out of school, as she could. And her book will allow all of them to tell their story. And I think that's going to be an absolutely vital contribution to not only Virginia civil rights history, but U.S. civil rights history. She asked me to read the proof of it, and I told her that it was like seeing the Vietnam War Memorial for the first time. You hear about the war, but then you see all of those names and you touch them. We're going page by page in her galley proof, and seeing all the names and the faces and hearing all the stories, it just deepened it even more than one could have thought possible. The gentleman you're talking about, John Hurt, and he's one of the people I dedicate this book to, dedicate it to him for giving this book a hero, because he is. Schools were shut down after his first grade year, and instead of going to the second grade, he went to work at a dairy farm. And he is the reason, he's one of the reasons, I never refer to those locked out of school in Prince Edward County as victims, as they referred to victims for years and years and years. I've never met one of them who I considered a victim. I call them casualties because they were casualties. They were casualties of the Civil War that kept on going after the Civil War as the fight continued to whether or not African Americans would have equal justice on the law. And that war is still ongoing today. It's very real. But he is a casualty because he was wounded in that war. And that man worked 2 jobs. He spoke next to Governor Warner on the steps of the Capitol in 2004. And his story is in here. And one thing I learned about him, he came up to thank me in April of 2003, and that's when he and I met. And he said, I just want to thank you for what you're doing. There was something, there was a bond, just like you and I felt, Danita, over the phone. You can tell when you have that spiritual connection. It's a blessing. And it was about 10 years later, he and I were talking, and he said, Ken, when you and I first met, I could barely write my own name. Now, he would have been a 56-year-old man then. 56-year-old man. A year ago, one of his tutors just sent me an email, said, I want you to know what John's going to be doing this fall. He is going to be working on phonics, and he's been 65 years old now. And he wants to learn cursive. He's going to be learning cursive because that's a skill he wants to master. That's no victim. I have not met any victims in the African American community in Prince Edward County. I've met deeply wounded casualties who have never stopped living, who have never stopped struggling, who have never stopped raising themselves up to the fullest potential possible.
Hi, Ken. I just want to say thank you for highlighting the need for miracles, healing, and love in our democracy. And as we prepare for the 2020 presidential election, there's one candidate, her name is Marianne Williamson, who also talks a lot about these ideals of love, healing, and miracles. And so my question for you is, how do we elevate these principles to the national stage?
Anytime we have a platform, we need to do that. Yes, we need to use it. I mean, I know there are a few Duke fans here, but nevertheless, I'm gonna quote from Virginia's head coach, Tony Bennett. It's something that I've always believed in, and I'll just share something really quick. And what Tony Bennett said is, he tells his players, let the light that shines through you be brighter than the light that shines upon you. And if everyone would do that, well, I can't even imagine. But it was in 1997, and former 5th District Congressman L.F. Payne and I were being honored with awards at the Moton Museum for our support of the fight to save that birthplace of the Civil Rights Movement. It's now official. The Civil Rights Movement was born there. You can look on the U.S. Civil Rights Trail's timeline of significant events, and the very first one is that. So it's no longer a debate. But rather than just be given an award, I wanted to take advantage of that moment. It was much like this one. And the audience was comprised of many people who had been locked out of school. 1997, remember, President Bill Clinton was sort of talking about, should there be a national apology for slavery? We still need one. And it's part of my reparation plan, which maybe we can talk about later. I did not want to wait. There I was, editor of the Farmville Herald, in front of people whom another editor of the Farmville Herald had done his damnedest and succeeded in locking them out of school. And so I told them that I did not want to wait for anything President Clinton or Congress might do, but I wanted to apologize to them right there. And as many of their names as I could, I called them name by name by name. And I apologized to them for slavery. I apologized to them for segregation and Jim Crow and everything done in its name. And as I spoke those words, and looking into their eyes, I know that words of sorrow, that an apology has power, and it's a necessary, integral step that we must take as a nation, but also as individuals. And they asked me if I would print what I said in the paper, and I did. It's also in the book. But we need, anytime we have a chance, we need to promote, and we need to take re-ownership of love and what love really, really can do.
Yes.
Good afternoon. My name is Edward Morton, and I'm a part of Prince Edward County School Closing. I want to ask the young man a question in the back. There was a lot of people in Prince Edward who didn't go to school. You can go from Hampton to Sydney. You can go from all around surrounding counties in Prince Edward. And I was mad as hell when school closed. I was 5 years old, and I went to the school called Mercy Seat Baptist School. And that was the school I went to, and I attended there. And the whole thing that I see, that healing starts within. Okay, start within. And I was mad at the Farmville Herald because what they printed was hogwash to me. And if you look around, you had two colleges there. They didn't care nothing about it. Nothing. You mean, you got two colleges that right there in Prince Edward, and they did nothing. And now everybody want to jump on the bandwagon and say, we're going to do this, we're going to help you guys out. But what happened to 5 years that my friend and myself didn't go to school? We had to struggle that you learn. You was talking about the young man couldn't read, right? I'm right here. And if you look at around, everybody want to jump and say, what can we do to Prince Edward? What you can do, really, is pray for them. Because nothing's going to ever change there unless people get together and work together, like you say, as a group and love. And love starts within. start within. We had just had our 60th anniversary there, okay? And we was there at Prince Edward. And my story is in the Longwood story that they put out. And the whole family, everybody have a story to tell. And all around the county have a story. And they locked us out for what? For what? I'm still trying to seek that answer. For what? Thank you.
What's your name, sir?
Edward Morton.
Edward Morton.
They called me Blue back in high school.
We had come to the table, want to honor you and remember you, Edward Morton.
Well, Leroy Ross is here too. He's another one. And the whole thing is that 21, I finished school. I wouldn't have done that if I didn't play sports.
That's right.
Okay? If I didn't play no sports, I would have dropped out. And a lot of my friends didn't even go back. They couldn't pump with for a living.
But
Or
thank
working
you
in
for being
the
an
tobacco
example
field.
for us.
No, and you were right. The most crucial civil war is the one that's being fought within each of us. And what wins inside us, and then what comes out of us as a consequence, determines the fate of the world around us.
Thank you. We're going to have to cut the question short, but Ken is going to be signing books out in the lobby after the panel, so you should be able to get a chance to say something to him then. But thank you, Ken, so much.
Thank you.
We have a short little video clip as we transition to the next phase, so enjoy that.
You guys have any questions before we move on? Anything you want to chat about? No, we good? Yes, sir? That's an interesting question. What do you mean by that? Recently is the key. Recently is the key. Right. But so to your question, I think you have to understand what the word reparations means first. So reparations, you are repairing something that you have broken. You are paying for something that you were supposed to pay for. I'm not saying that there aren't people living in America today who are suffering and are going through pain and strife because of what's happening when it comes to machines taking jobs, factories becoming industrialized, etc. But reparations is a specific conversation about a specific time in America, and that is black people were slaves. You know what I mean? I've even heard people say like, oh, but there were some of the Irish who were indentured. Like, yeah, slavery. Look at the numbers, look at the time, look at the level of work. You could not work toward your freedom. For most black people in America, this was a time when you lived and died as a slave. And so that's what reparations is about. And so I hear what you're saying, but I think that's a completely separate conversation that needs to be had about the now. Because if you are not careful, what you then do is you combine everybody's suffering into the same bowl, and you make it seem like all injustices have the same weighting, and they don't. Just like crimes. You know, theft isn't the same as murder. We don't try them the same way. And as much as there is a white person who's suffering today, I feel for anybody who's suffering, because I know what it's like to be poor, I know what it's like to suffer. I didn't come from a wealthy family. We struggled when I was growing up. But I also understand that there are levels of that suffering, you know? And so sometimes white people, it does block a white person, because you go, white privilege, and the person goes, I'm poor and I'm white, where's the privilege? You know, white people are like, I wish I could activate my white privilege. I wish I could do it right now. White privilege! Give me something. I get that. I get that. Trust me, I get it. It is hard to accept that you have benefits because of the color of your skin if you cannot see the benefits that you have. But the thing I try to explain to a person is, think of it more like golf. Don't think of it as privilege, then think of it like a handicap, right? In golf, they acknowledge that you are in a position where you need so many advantages to be competitive in the game, right? So what they say is you have a handicap of 15, so that means like you're going to be hitting from this tee and you get more chances to get the ball in because we understand the position you're in. And if you're a black person in America, from slavery, from day one, the number of injustices that have held black people back in America amount to an insurmountable, like you look at black people's freedom, you look at black people's land, just land alone. The amount of wealth you can you can acquire over time if you own land is exponential, because you have the land, you have the fact that you can borrow based on the land, you have the fact that you can use the money that you have borrowed to grow more wealth, you can use it to grow your family's wealth. Just taking that away from black people alone is crippling them. And so you combine that with slavery, and then you look at Jim Crow laws. You didn't let black people in America live in the areas that they wanted to live in. They couldn't get loans from the banks that they wanted to get loans from. And then on top of that, when they started getting the loans from American banks were found to be giving them higher interest rates when in fact they were the same risk as many of the other races that they were giving loans to. So when you combine all of those things, I think it's safe to say that black Americans have a conversation that they need to be having with the United States. Doesn't involve me, doesn't involve white people, it's like, yo, American government, meet the black people. That's it.
We're gonna take a moment to bring the lights up and get our panel started. Okay.
He just makes, I mean, I don't know if it's just the accent, maybe it's just the accent, I don't know. But we wanted to play that because that is really, it says exactly what reparations is, so. And I'm gonna bring up Miss Viola Baskerville.
Hi, good evening. I refer to myself as a recovering elected official. After 16 years in government, that's what I'm doing. I'm still having some of those traumatic moments. I was honored to work with Ken Woodley on the Brown versus Board of Education scholarship, and it was a roller coaster ride. And I was honored to have previously, the year before, offered the apology. So we met under very good circumstances. My job tonight is to be really brief. Here at the beginning is to introduce myself, as I have to you, and also to introduce Reggie Gordon, who will be part of our panel tonight. He is a native Richmonder, yes, and currently he is the Deputy Chief Administrative Officer for the City of Richmond. Reggie has a wonderful background in community wealth building, and so that's one of the reasons he's been invited here tonight, to share his extensive background in human services, aging, disabilities, and multicultural affairs, and to speak from that perspective in how can we heal what's broken. He's a former CEO of Richmond chapter of the American Red Cross, which is where I met Reggie when I worked in City Hall as a member of City Council. He is a former fund developer for United Way and former director of Homeward and the William Byrd Community House, which we worked on projects there together as well. So I'm honored to have Reggie Gordon as part of the panel tonight. So let's get busy. So, now, right. Let's talk about this whole concept of reparations. What has it come to be defined as, and what should it really be? Trevor Howard gave a really good sort of introduction of his thoughts on what it should mean. So from your perspective, Danita, what do you think we should be headed toward in understanding what it is?
Well, as I said, I think Trevor did a great job summing that up, but more to it, I think that when we have been talking about reparations, probably over we've been talking about reparations in the United States for literally hundreds of years. And the hotbed conversation is always about money. And I think that because of the already divisive nature that we have, that racism causes, and then you stick the money conversation in there, it just has left us in the cesspool of not being able to want to look at it. I refer to it as the barbed wire history. Every time we come close to it and get pricked, we back up and say, oh no, we're not going to deal with that. But reparations is actually, as I was saying before, is so much more than money. And just like anything in your house that's broken, okay, the longer you wait to fix it, right, the worse it gets. So we have had this attitude in the United States, well, oh, it's so big, there's no way we can do this. We do everything else we want to do. We take, we put a man on the moon. We go conquer other countries. In fact, truth be told, somebody came here and took this country from somebody. So if we can have that kind of audacious spirit to fulfill things and obligations, reparations is actually something that could definitely happen. But we have to be very intentional. We have to, just as my friend here mentioned, look at systemic racism, and we also have to look at it on an individual level as well, and how we can take care of it and move it forward from a government level, but also change the climate of where we are morally and spiritually as a people, because whatever the people clamor for, that's what the government is supposed to recognize and follow through.
I'm glad you ended on that statement about the government, because I want to switch to Reggie now as working within local government. And from your perspective as a community wealth builder, healer, and then transitioning into local government, what is it that local government should do?
Okay. Well, first of all, I'm honored to be on.
Can you give him the microphone?
You can't hear me?
Oh, he's got a.
He's got a special mic.
I got a special mic. Can everybody hear me? Yeah. Okay, great. So first of all, honored to be on the panel. Congratulations coming to the table. This is an important conversation. I have, when I first started at the city, I walked in the door as the director of the Office of Community Wealth Building. Now, some of you might have been involved in the journey to create an Office of Community Wealth Building in Richmond, Virginia. We're the first office of its kind in the nation. In 2011, Dwight Jones and that administration created an anti-poverty commission, because at that point, I think the community, from the local government to community leaders, felt that poverty was intractable, and we were going around in circles with the conversation and not making much headway. So over a matter of 9 months, there was much discussion on that commission, comprised of like 60 community leaders from the faith community, local government, people who were experiencing crises, academia, to come up with how does Richmond move to a new level of discourse, or not actually action, with regard to addressing the challenges that we see with regard to people who are struggling or stuck in intergenerational poverty. And at the result of that commission was several recommendations, and the primary one being to create an office that would have the responsibility to execute the recommendations that came from 60 plus community leaders. And it's just ironic, I was on that commission, and now years later I ended up being the director of the office. So there's much to celebrate, I guess is the right word, in Richmond as far as repairing. Because the in-depth conversations leading to what do we do to break this cycle, the primary thing would be to look at what resources need to be in place to break down some of the systemic and structural barriers that have kept families and individuals as the other. And as much, I'm a Richmonder, I grew up here, ironically born in Farmville, but grew up in Richmond, and we are so comfortable with that side of town has some struggles. I'd rather live over here. Those schools have some struggles. We'll have events to encourage those kids, but we're not encouraging them to move into our neighborhoods. And I think we often put these issues in historical context, but it's present. And it's really hard to admit that we can be supportive of people from afar. And I think with the Office of Community Wealth Building and what we're doing with Human Services, we're trying to encourage more proximity. It's time, it is going to be uncomfortable, but coming to the table does it. It's these conversations where you say, I had not realized that I was, had my own biases that affected the way I entered the world. We have talked frequently about how we in Richmond and other places express our largesse from Thanksgiving to Christmas. But in 2019 and beyond, this is about economic mobility, upward economic mobility. So we need to pivot from that to how do we repair the economics of our community and not just have a celebration for kids at Christmas.
Rebecca, you're starting to get into, go ahead, that's applause. You're starting to get to where I think we need to really dig.
Yes.
As far as, okay, for those of us who are Richmonders, who live in Richmond, work, play, call this home, what do you see as specific examples, each one of you, 2 or 3, because it could be 1,000. There probably are 1,000. Specific things that you see, maybe the most egregious things that are broken, and briefly, why are they broken?
Okay, for us, I'll just be brief. I do this day in, day out. We landed on jobs, that there are so many people let's call them returning citizens, people who have, for various reasons, were in prison, they've come back home, they paid their debt to society, and we're talking hundreds, if not thousands of people who are unable to find employment, unable to find housing, unable to get public benefits, and the list goes on. We serve them turkey at Thanksgiving when they're the homeless. but that's, the onus is on us to say, I will hire that person. If you have the agency or capacity to hire someone who has a criminal background, that's how we turn the corner. And that takes courage, because that's going to impact your coworkers. That's going to impact, the impression of, well, if that person messes up, I tried, I'll never do it again. That's one individual. So to change our thought about, this is a person. I'm hiring Reggie because he interviewed well, he's a hard worker, his background, what he does now proves to me that he's somebody that we want on our team. Imagine if that happened all over Richmond.
Danita, he mentioned specifically housing and employment. Where would you go?
Well, I think I would start in the heart space first. I love Virginia, I love Richmond, I have a lot of faith in my government, but I also know that for me, change comes from a grassroots movement. It comes from the people sitting out here. Dr. Camara Jones, she's a well-known epidemiologist, and in her speaking, she talks a lot about the red flowers and the yellow flowers. We all love the red flowers, and we water those, and we put those right there in front of the yard around the mailbox so everybody can see those. Those yellow flowers we may not like as well, so we put them on the side, and we don't water them as well, and we don't put them in a nicer pot. But guess what? These red flowers will always flourish, because we're always throwing money at those things, the schools, the environments, the neighborhoods. But these people who live in the hood, these people who are returning citizens, we always have to nickel and dime, how much money are we going to put into them? How much time can we put into them? We don't really want them to live in this neighborhood. We're going to let them stay over here until they get themselves together. Those people are not watered and they're not nurtured. And as long as we're not paying attention to them, they're going to fall farther and farther and farther behind. That's where we are now. I see people out here that are willing to invest in the city that they live in. And I think that we really make this issue way too hard. I think if you see somebody who needs some help and you're perfectly placed to do that, do it. If you have some time to help a mother who's working 2 jobs, maybe you can sit with this African-American woman's children, and while you do it, teach them how to read. Help them with their science homework. Even this beautiful edifice that we're in now, with in the Virginia Museum of History and Culture. Y'all, please don't put me out here for saying this, but it's a bastion of culture and history. And I think that one of the things that this institution could be doing is going into the high schools, going into the middle schools, and finding children who are interested in art and teaching them all about art education, art administration, and how they can work in a building just like this one. So there's so many things that we can do as individuals. I'm not going to wait for my government. I love y'all, and I want you to work real hard because I have a lot of faith in you. But I know in coming to the table, we have a 22-page, dare I say it again, a 22-page reparation guide that talks about personal, community, and systemic opportunities for reparations and change right now. And we are using this document for the rest of this year and into the next for as long as it takes to get to where we all need to be.
I'm glad you said the word systemic and sustainability in that. Ken, how would you advise others who may have a difficulty crossing that line? How do they cross the line? What gives them courage to cross the line? And how do you see systemic, sustainable action working?
I think there are three things that need to be done as part of a reparations program in this nation, and it goes to the heart, but also goes to the money, because we're not going to repair the harm until we bring economic justice. I would like to see Virginia take the lead in this, and Tim Kaine and I were having conversations prior to November 2016, and I believe he would have taken the lead on this proposal had he become vice president. But this is the landscape we've got, and this is a journey we need to continue. I believe there are three things taken in succession. One, I would like to see a national light of reconciliation, and I understand the word reconciliation on the surface is problematic because you can say, and truthfully, how can we reconcile something that was never won to begin with? So are we going to reconcile the races when they've never been won to begin with? 2 points on that. One, when we are born into this world, we are all children of God. We are one when we take our first breath, when we cry our first cry. It's only after we arrive that people, and it's been white people, divide us up based on skin color, economic status, all of those things, artificial barriers that divide us. So I think we can get back to that children of God family. But there's another definition to reconciliation, and that is harmonization. And that means bringing different notes together to create harmony. So that's what I mean by a national light of reconciliation, that we bring all our notes together. And it would be a light that shines in Washington, D.C. 24/7. It would be surrounded by statues of men, women, and children of all ages and all ethnicities, joined hand in hand, walking out 360 degrees to every point in the compass of this country. At the center, in addition to the light, would necessarily be this, because we can't truly begin to repair the harm that began in 1619 until we as a nation apologize for the terrorism, the horror that was slavery. It's unconscionable that this has not been done. Yes, about a decade ago, the House of Representatives, and in a different year, the Senate adopted resolutions that were apologies. But they were never reconciled. They never became an act of Congress. So they never became a national apology. And anybody born in the world today has no idea that they even happened. So we need a national apology for slavery and segregation, Jim Crow, and all those things that were done in its name. And those words need then to be read by the President of the United States, whoever he or she may be, because we all know that the man calling himself president today, I would not have him read the side panel on a box of cereal listing the ingredients, because it could be the best cereal in the world, but by the time that man finished reading those ingredients, it would be unfit for human consumption. And that's just the truth. So the President of the United States would read that apology on prime time, every channel. It would be the equivalent of all of us watching Neil Armstrong take the first step on the moon. It would join us in a nation in that moment. Then those words would become a part of a public, permanent apology for slavery. Because until people admit that something was done wrong, how are you going to get them to talk about repairing it? And I don't want to hear people say, I never had a slave, I never had anything to do with slavery. Well, yes, that's true. But we are responsible for our own moment in time. And get back to this moment as ours. That's what we have a civic responsibility to do. And then we got to walk that talk. As important as those words are, I believe we need the equivalent of a national Marshall Plan, a domestic Marshall Plan. After World War II, we had a Marshall Plan that rebuilt Europe. We need to do that for ourselves. And what I'd like to see is massive and enduring investments in all across the board, because slavery and segregation affected every stratum, every inch of African American life. There's nothing that went untouched. In education, infrastructure, economic development, health, housing, job training, everything in urban and rural communities where there are significant African American populations. But where this becomes a little bit more politically practical is that those entire communities, urban and rural, would be lifted. You wouldn't have improvements, cookie cutter, and anyone who's not African American doesn't get it. No, all of those communities would be united. So you'd get all of those communities, whites, blacks, everybody together, seeing it lift those entire communities. And therefore you'd have greater political traction in Congress, because most members of Congress would have something in it for them, for their constituents. But I want to go back to Virginia's example, because it became harder in 2004, even though they came very close to saying no, once the General Assembly expressed its regret, its sorrow. Regret is an apology. Once Virginia said, we're sorry for what we did with massive resistance, then it became a little bit harder for them to say, well, we're sorry, but we don't really want to do anything about it. So that's the first thing. And I think once you had people, and especially the white people who don't support reparations because they don't understand it means to repair the harm, once you have them experience the nation saying, I'm sorry for something that was done that they had no responsibility for, but they have responsibility for the healing moment today, then you open their minds to, you know what? Yeah, that felt good. Anybody in this room who's let go of anger, who's let go of a vengeful thought and felt that lightness of being, that's the power at work there. You'll get so many people, I believe, who will feel after this nation apologizes and there's a light of reconciliation that means something, that they will be more inclined to take a cue from those statues and join hands as human beings in all those communities and say, you know what? It was wrong. I'm so glad we have publicly said it was wrong and publicly said that we as a nation are sorry. So now let's try and repair the harm. Yes, we are on board with that.
Okay. And I know you're the moderator, but this is my party, so I'm going to ask questions. Okay. Yes. So one thing that we talk about all the time in coming to the table, and we have such a good way of doing this, because we have conversations over food. So there's no fighting. People are usually, you know, they're eating good food and they're happy. But I'm listening to you and I'm thinking, oh, that would be so wonderful if we could all join hands and go into the clouds and the rainbows together. But are white people, are they grieving in that way? Because what I hear is so much as slavery, why can't they get over it? That's what I hear. Now we have an educated group, but you know, we go to movies together and we read together and we talk to each other and we share stories. But a great number of people, this is what I hear from white people, why can't they get over it? And then actually even on the African American side, I hear even black people saying reparations, it can never happen. But I know that comes from a place of being so beat down for so long that you can't possibly imagine things being different. How do we get over that place so that we can walk into this new evolutionized America together?
Well, if we can't walk into that place, we might as well cut off the lights right now and all of us leave, and there's no sense to have any table to come to. That's where we need muscular idealism, perseverance and tenacity. And
that's what we had to do with that bill.
Absolutely.
Because we met obstacles at every turn, and it was take half a loaf. Let's only make sure that the students that were actually impacted get scholarships. And I wanted to go gung-ho, and I wanted to do this Harriet Tubman, you know, you come with me or you die trying. And so, you know, I wasn't settling for just that one generation, because we know the systemic damage that's done when one generation is not educated and then their children are not educated. So that, you know, you move in that path, but that's that difficulty, that's that muscular. You got to be willing to fall on your sword.
Yes.
And I guess the question is, for those that are finding it difficult to even cross the line, how do you get them to even, you know, to fall on your sword? Reggie, you talked about the social and economic injustices that have happened. How do we start to get people to move in that direction?
And we have struggled with this very point, even in government, because you're right. It's how do we have this breakthrough? And if you come to our office on the 5th floor of City Hall, we actually have an art exhibit in the office called Walk in My Shoes, because we think that, and we have Molly Reinhardt is my friend, who happens to be white. She came to our office and said, I want to go deeper. How do I do it? And we connected her with a young woman who happens to be African American who was struggling. Molly, well-heeled, you know, and felt that she volunteered and given money to nonprofits, but she felt there was something missing as far as being transformative. So for now almost 2 years, she's been walking with this young woman, listening to her travails with regard to employment and housing. And then Molly, because she has agency, has come back to us to say, I want to go to the General Assembly because this is no longer something I read. I know what happened to her. It is completely unfair because she's a friend of mine. She's gotten fired. She got fired from a job. Molly's told me the story because she worked at McDonald's. Her son was going on a field trip in a month. She asked the boss for that day off. That day arrived. There was a shortage of employees at work. The boss called and said, you got to come in or you'll get fired. The woman decided not to come in. She was fired. And so she was trying to be a mother, supportive of her child. But if you didn't know the facts, you would say that, you know, that woman didn't come to work. And she's a responsible mom. So I think the more instances where we can match people together by individuals or churches who have 20 families that they're walking with for 20 years, that's how we disrupt this distance. And I think Richmond is small enough. We have 50,000 people who are in poverty. So just imagine matching up individuals and families so that we all share the journey, we understand the plight, and we walk together to the General Assembly and have that muscular revolution.
Yes. Very good.
I'll give you an example of crossing the line. This is true. When that idea came to me on February 18, 2003, it was for those who'd been locked out of school, but also for their children and also for their grandchildren. But the state told us that it would not be constitutional because you could not prove harm. It's just every study as well as common sense will tell you there's generational harm. But Bill Howe, when he was still Speaker, white man, Republican, at that time it appeared that there would be a significant amount of scholarship money left unused. And I thought, why not try again for the children and the grandchildren? So Dorothy Holcomb and Rita Oda Mosley and I had talked to Speaker Howe, and I wanted to talk to him about that, revisiting that. And he came down from Fredericksburg on a summer day, and we met in his office in the General Assembly building. And this conservative white man, at the end of our conversation, listening to them, he absolutely said, yes, the remaining money should go to children and grandchildren, and I will do what I can to help. That is a transformational moment, and that was real. That was real. That's not pie in the sky. I'm not saying, peace, love, and all that. That was meeting people in a room. It wasn't coming to the table, but it was coming to the heart. It was the table. And too many times now, people don't break bread together. It seems like we wait until our loaf of bread gets hard and stale, and we'll hit each other over the head with it. But if Bill Howe can change like that and be a white man, Speaker of the House, Republican, and so I have not given up on that because I don't understand the constitutionality. So I am determined to go back in to legislators and see about getting it looked at again, and maybe Governor Northam could do something instead of just sitting in his mansion and not doing a damn thing to really heal what he has helped to harm by his own actions.
That's why Ken and I got together so well. We were going to go. We were going to do or die. This was going to be our last stand or whatever. But Ken's never been one to hold his tongue, so I really appreciate his honesty. So often in Richmond, because of our history, it's this black-white conversation. But the conversation has to be broader because we have so much more diversity in our community, and we have individuals coming to our community or coming to our state first time, and there are wounds between groups of people. I'll give you a quick example. I grew up in the east end of Richmond. In our neighborhood, we had corner stores, and the people who ran the corner stores were Jewish. And they loaned money if you couldn't pay until the first of the month, that type of thing. But at the end of the day, sun's going down, they're out of the community. We see that happening 60 years later, where we see the same thing in many black communities. The individual store owners are not of the same race or religion. They close the stores at the end of the day, and they go to their homes, wherever their homes are. They're not in the east end of Richmond or the south side of Richmond where these stores are. And there's this tenseness between the groups of individuals, the people that come in the store and the people that own the store. How do we start to have conversations around healing or fixing what's broken in a larger culturally, racially, religiously diverse community? Anybody want to take a stab at that one?
Well, I just while you think, the Office of Multicultural Affairs is in Human Services, and Carla Ramos, who's the director there, we have similar dialogue, but you're correct. People experience Richmond in different ways. And this is going to be hard for me to say, but this is what I was told last week. The new immigrants who are coming to Richmond don't want public benefits, don't want any help from the government, and so, because we've offered. And so they are like sort of self-contained. I'm generalizing because it varies even within the immigrant community. Because they feel that the American dream is more realistic for them. Because where they came from was abhorrent. So the only thing that's missing was they were used to health care and education. So what they do access, this is a generalization, in Richmond is like crossover ministries or the kids are in public schools. But other than that, we don't have that much diversity in our people who are looking for assistance at social services. They're white or black. And when we keep drilling down, it's just, we need to learn. That's impressive in a way, that there's this cohesion within the subpopulations where if you need money, we'll get you the money to start your business. We will hire you. We will transport you where you need to go. And I look at that and go, wow, wouldn't that be fantastic if we could expand that so that people didn't have to wait on some money to come from on high. It's like the communities take care of themselves, much like they might have done years ago prior to integration. So that was something. I don't know why I had a difficult reaction to the conversation. I'm still processing.
Danita, you want to take a stab?
I do. I think it's a lot easier for people who are, forgive the euphemism, but fresh off the boat, because they're coming from a place where they have been able to identify for a longer period of time, working together in a community. I mean, we have had so many things to divide the African American community from generation to generation to generation that we hardly recognize ourselves. But to your question, I also think that we have stories that may not be true about one another. I've lived in Churchill and on the South Side and in a lot of different communities. And I've lived in areas where I couldn't get a loan to start a business or to even buy the home that I lived in, but somebody else could come in and do that. And yes, when I met that person, I came at them with some resistance. How you did this, and I could not do this because of the color of my skin. And they have a story about me saying, oh, well, she's just one of those black people who don't know how to take care of herself. She probably just another welfare mother. And we just, as my son said, we grill at each other all the time, and we never get to know who we are. But if we could just get past a lot of these really divisive narratives that we have about each other, everybody's heard the stories, and I know I've already got the 2-minute sign there. But I went to school on the campus where people thought that my brain was smaller because I was black. Okay, I went to a conference just last week that was about inequities in health. And they took a poll right here in 2016, and a lot of the white medical students still thought that the skin of African Americans was thicker, and we didn't need as much anesthesia. Those are the kind of stories that come up through generations. They're not necessarily taught in a medical school or maybe even not even a history book. But what we are saying at home to our families, what we're saying, in our churches, what we're saying in our schools, those are the racism that we learn from the people we love. Because I'm sure that you worked with some folks that may not have shared your personal politics, but they had to have been still people that you were close to and you were friendly to. And I'm not pointing the finger at you, but what I'm saying is, to me, that's the harder bridge to cross. People that raise us, love us, and unfortunately seed us with a story that does not serve. So I'm with you. We need to have deeper conversations, and it might have taken, what I should have done when I walked into the corner store and that gentleman said something to me that was untoward. I may have, called my husband and maybe had him over for dinner, he and his wife, and had a conversation so he could get to know us better. Because that's where real change starts.
Sure.
The 2-minute warning,
I
is
think
there, we're past it, yes.
Oh, we have 30 seconds.
30 seconds.
Really quickly, I want to give the 30 seconds to Ken. Quickly, because you started to touch on some of the things you did and moments you took. What can churches, houses of worship, who have so much influence on people on a weekly basis start to do? Just 3 or 4 things quickly, Ken. She's going to give us another 30 seconds on.
Become a love group. Take what you have within the church, open all the windows and doors and go out into the community and live what you're saying, and look for churches that don't fit your demographic congregation, and seek partnerships, and not just go to church together on Sunday once a month, but look at neighborhoods and see what project you might be able to do together as a black and a white church, or a white and Asian church, or a synagogue, or a mosque. All of us together. And the only way you break stereotypes is direct engagement. And that's it. And that's what needs to be done. We need to get off our knees and reach out to one another.
Wow, excellent. I don't think it could have been said any better than that. I think we're out of time for this evening.
Of course, just a few things. We thank you all for coming tonight, and we have comment cards. In fact, everybody who's part of coming to the table, raise your hand now so people can know who you are. And if anybody has any questions, you can ask these wonderful people who get together monthly to have the courageous yet clumsy and often uncomfortable conversation on race. But they're doing the hard work. And we want to offer an opportunity for you all to do this work with us. I mean, we are 600 deep in our engagements every month with people who want to cross lines for racial healing in this city. So we have a wonderful photographer that's going to go outside and interview those of you who are willing to step out a little bit and say what you learned tonight, what you want to take home with you. And we also have comment cards if you want to fill out a comment card about what you experienced tonight. And we're hoping to get some of those comments on the website. You guys will be able to read some of those things. Oh, and on the 21st, the third Tuesday at Gifter Park Presbyterian Church. And hi, Gifter Park, how are you? We are starting what we're calling our deep dive in the reparations campaign for the city of Richmond. So the 22-page reparation guide that I mentioned, we are taking the first part of it and we are working it. We are visiting just what you said. We're putting churches together. We're putting schools together for conversations. We are putting families together. We're going on pilgrimages together. And we are creating a new Richmond, and we invite you to join us. Thank you so much for coming.
What are your thoughts on the event tonight, on coming to the table?
I'm really very excited. I've only lived in Richmond now for about 3 years, and in those 3 years, my wife and I have we've at least tried to understand the complexity of the place, and believe me, as somebody who's kind of a newcomer, it's a really complex place. And I think what tonight's event helped to do was to give us a better understanding, a deeper understanding of the complexity of these issues. You think back about things about like massive resistance and what happened over 400 years and so forth. It's an astonishingly tragic story, and it's a story that can't be discussed enough. So for me, it was exciting, it was invigorating, it was sad. It was frustrating, it's angering in some ways because you scratch your head and you say, how could this have happened? How did we do this to our fellow human beings? But it's also an inspiring moment because you realize There are people of goodwill all over the place who want to do something about this.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
What are your thoughts on this evening coming to the table?
Okay. Well, I am a museum historian, history teacher, and so for me, one of the things that really came forward was how the presenter that began the evening, Ken, once he discovered the history of the place that he was, how it affected him and energized him to come forward into the present with that history. And for me, it's a struggle every day to try to make sure that the whole of history is discussed, that the whole story is told. And so that just really illustrated to me the importance of it and how we need to continue to converse, as he said, to take the past forward into the present and to live the present, knowing what happened and acknowledging it so that we can move forward. So that was very powerful for me. The whole conversation was very powerful.
Let me ask you this. You are a historian.
Yes.
All right? So you can help me with this. When you see a black child coming down Monument, looking at the statues, coming to the museum, how does that help their self-esteem?
I mean, it doesn't help anybody's self-esteem to feel oppressed by anybody, and to have. I mean, I can feel oppressed by buildings like this that are meant to lift us up.
You taking shots here?
You know, just because it's so big and I'm so small.
Okay.
But I don't have a good answer for what to do with those monuments. They shouldn't be rubbed in your nose, but they also, every time we shove something under the carpet and go, well, we don't want to talk about that. I mean, for years, you went to a museum and there was no equal history. There was no attempt at it. Slavery was shoved under that carpet. That hasn't helped anybody. So I don't agree with hiding the truth, but it has to be the whole truth.
Yeah, thank you.
Does that make sense?
Yes, it does. It makes a lot of sense. It makes a lot. Thank
Has
you.
to go
You ready to go?
somewhere.
Yeah, yes.
All right, you next.
All right, doctor.
All right.
All right, so
Thank you. Thank you.
what do you want me to stand and what do you want me to say?
All right. You good, Rick? Come back up.
Back up.
There you go.
Okay.
Now, what I want you to do is tell me, I'll do it this way. Give me your thoughts on the event tonight, coming to the table.
I'm coming to the table?
What are your thoughts on the event this evening?
Okay.
Where do we go from here?
Well, you have to continue to have conversations. The beautiful thing about coming to the table is that there are small groups in the gathering of 60, 70 people, and in small groups of 5, 6, and 7 people, we can talk to people as human beings and not as sound bites or spinning some ideas and understanding each other at a more human level. That's the beauty of coming to the table from my perspective. And tonight's conversation about repairing what's been broken, bringing that conversation to coming to the table on the monthly gatherings helps people reach in and connect with their humanity. That's the way I see it.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Can you give me your thoughts on this evening event coming to the table?
It was interesting. I think one of the concerns I had personally about this whole issue of reparations, one of my concerns is economic justice. And to give you an example of that, it's amazing to me when we talk about economic justice how folks will frown upon giving a mother and her children $291 in TANF benefits $200 in SNAP benefits and Medicaid, but they frown upon or don't comment upon the fact that you have a corporation in this country that has $1 trillion market cap, made $11 billion, but paid 0 federal income taxes. So you critique that one side, you don't critique what I call the economics of tribalism. So I think that's one of the challenges we got to deal with, the bigger economic picture and how that trickles down to the rest of us.
And on that note, I want to say thank you.
Okay.
Okay? How are you today?
I'm doing great. My name is Mark Person. I'm a native of Richmond, Virginia. And I also have a link to Southampton County, Virginia, but thought the presentation tonight was excellent. It's created dialogue. Race is huge in the country, and I think it's important for people to talk about it and discuss, the feelings. Everyone has an opinion, and it's very important to be shared. So I was real impressed with the program. Seeing the gentlemen that were affected by it in years earlier brings that much more significance to it. So those gentlemen, it was real nice that they were here too. My link too, I believe in giving back to the community. I'm a George Wythe graduate of Richmond, and we recently had a segment with the University of Richmond on growing up in civil rights Richmond. And it ties into this, the topics of segregation, Jim Crow, I went through the busing era, I'm a baby boomer generation. And one other family link, my family's donated Nat Turner's Bible to the Smithsonian. And it's very significant. It's part of the African American Museum of History and Culture. And we hope that generations will see it. It tells the story of the civil rights struggle, but we're honored that the museum accepted it, so it ties into the healing process. So thank you for having me tonight.
I can't let you go nowhere.
Okay.
I got a question.
All right.
Tell me about how your family got that Bible of Nat Turner.
Okay.
And your relationship with that story.
Okay. Can I mention Virginia currency?
You can say it.
All right. I've served as the family spokesperson for the Person family. My ancestors, we have an ancestral church in Southampton County. It dates back to the 1830s. We're still operating and still have service on Sundays. And the Nat Turner story, Nat Turner was an enslaved African American minister, and he traveled through the countryside. He was considered the prophet, and he could read and write. He was literate. And Nat Turner, one of the local churches, a white man approaches him by the name of Ethel Brantley, and one of the local churches refuses baptismal. Nat Turner had known my ancestors, and he approaches John Person, who owns the land, and he said, no questions asked, Nat, everyone's welcome. And Nat Turner was baptized on Person's Mill Pond back around 1828. When the insurrection took place, some of my ancestors were victims of the insurrection and were killed. And Nat Turner, the Bible, when he's captured, the Bible ends up in the courthouse, and many years later the officials are cleaning out the courthouse, and they knew the link to the family, and it's presented to the family. It's passed down through generations. And my cousin Morris Person, and I visited him yesterday. He's 89 years old. They said, we'd like you to be the spokesperson, but it wasn't talked about a whole lot. And his stepdaughter, Wendy Porter, contacts the Smithsonian, and she said, we have Nat Turner's Bible. And a gentleman by the name of Dr. Rex Ellis comes to the house, and his first is just a real super person and scholar, and he had studied Nat Turner quite a bit. And the Bible, the roots date back to 1782, came from Edinburgh, Scotland. And Nat Turner, when his first owner, if you will, he could read and write. So when it passed down to the family, it goes after he's captured. The Bible goes to the courthouse, so it passes down to my cousin Morris. Wendy contacts the Smithsonian. They come to the home, and he looks at it, and he said it's a portable Bible, so he knew it was small. And they ran the test. We had the provenance, knew where it was. And it's about 5 inches by 3 inches. And one of the family members had studied the Bible, and she wrote notes on it, on hat. And next thing, the Smithsonian accepts it. So about a year, and I'd done some research quite a bit, that I'd sent them, and they put all the pieces together. And then the significant part was there was a little gathering in a lot of our families. We celebrate and have picnics, and we'd have get-togethers. And the Bible, there's a picture taken on the tree stump. This is back in the early 1900s. And there's a watermark on the page, and the Smithsonian matches the watermark. When they study it, it matched in the paper, and they ran the test and the provenance, and so it was authenticated. This was Nat Turner's Bible. So as we speak, the story continues. So 2009, the Bible goes to the Smithsonian. 2012, they began breaking ground, and then the museum officially opens in 2016. And between then, it was like a perfect storm. Next thing, we were contacted by CBS Sunday Morning, and my cousin Morris and myself are in a segment on national TV with Congressman John Lewis and Quincy Jones ahead of us, and we're the third link to it. It's shown nationally, and we had National Geographic contact us. And one of the important pieces too, I met the Turner family. They've been very supportive, and hearing that endorsement was very important. And Miss Evelyn Hawkins, recently we filmed with Virginia Currents. There's a segment, and it's called An Unexpected Friendship. And this was filmed in Southampton County. We spent the whole day filming. We filmed at the church, and we actually go onto the land that her family owns, where Nat Turner's captured, and the Smithsonian's in it. So we feel it's been just very significant part of our American history. And Nat Turner was a very powerful person. I think Dr. Rex Ellis said it best: if ever a spiritual Christian warrior, Nat Turner was it. So we're very appreciative. So that's a Nat Turner story.
I want to thank you. Do you have a card?
You know, I do.
Okay, that'll work.
But I'll write it down. You agree it's in the right place?
Yes. Give me your information.
Yeah, Mark Person. And my telephone number, our cell number is 804-512-6853, and home number is 233-2610. And email markperson5207@aol.com. Feel free to call me.
I will. What I would like to do is have a dialogue between you and a family member,
okay,
Nat Turner.
Okay.
In terms of where we are today.
Okay.
That's what I would like to work on.
Okay, we can make it happen.
And we can do that at the church.
But you can but Google Virginia Currents.
I do that.
Nat Turner, and it'll show that, okay?
Thank you.
And I'll let you know we have a reunion in September. I'll send you an invite.
Okay, okay, I'll do that.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay.
Tell me about your thoughts on the event, and what are your thoughts?
Well, this was
Oh! Let me start it over.
Okay.
Let me start it. I think I'll tell you, I got excited. Can you give me your thoughts on the events this evening?
This was actually the first coming to the table event I've been to, and I saw it on Facebook. One of my friends was coming to it, so I decided to come to it. And I'll tell you what, it was outstanding. I was really amazed at the quality of the presentation, but I had never given thought to the fact that some reparations had already been done. I don't know why I didn't realize that, but I really enjoyed hearing about someone who'd actually done something about a situation that he found to be inexcusable, and I would agree with that. So that was really exciting to hear. I also really enjoyed hearing about how when people share their stories and when they come together and talk to each other, that they really understand where the other person is coming from and are able to do things about it. I have been working lately in restorative justice, and I really want to see people, especially the suggestions about people coming out of prison, I really want to see those people be able to have a really good life and not go back in to the system and have a good job and have the things they need to support them to stay in a life that would make them feel good about themselves and empower them. So that suggestion tonight was really good.
It's almost like saying, if you look at it in terms of restorative justice, the average person when they come out of jail, all they're doing is coming out with $20, getting a bus ticket where they want to go, and that's the end of it. So how are they able to get on their feet?
Yeah.
You know, it's almost like saying, where's God's love in all of this?
Yes.
All right?
Yes.
We go to jail, we come out, but we're still stigmatized
Right.
forever.
Right.
Where is the help? If the average person can't afford a place to live,
Yeah.
all right, or hard to get a job, how is he going to survive?
Absolutely.
And if he's going to do something, where's the help? Who's the help
Right.
to help him change his life?
Yes.
Or where is training?
Yes. Yeah.
You know, there is no job training
Right.
while he's incarcerated.
Right.
So all that time is just wasted.
Yes.
You know, so if anybody want to get in contact with you, how do we do so?
Well, I work on the board for the Alliance for Unitive Justice. I do, in my day job, I'm with a nonprofit for families with kids with heart defects. But I also am on the board for the Alliance for Unitive Justice. So it's just a4uj.org. My name is Jody Smith, and I'd love to tell people more about what we're doing with that organization too.
All right, well, I'll give you a call and we'll get together.
Thank you. It's
Thank
so
you.
nice to meet you.
Likewise,
Thank
likewise.
you. Tell me your name again.
Clyde Bradley.
Clyde.
Mm-hmm.
Nice to meet you.
Likewise. Oh, you're on your own.
Okay, what do you want?
I want you to tell me about what your thoughts on this event this evening.
Well, my thought is basic that it was a U.S.-centric thought process and how to solve a problem, and nothing that really dealt with the problem. Okay.
What are your suggestions and ideas?
Well, my suggestion. Well, let me just say it this way. I've always said that the biggest issue is that we have two groups of white people who have an argument over what happened to us in this country. And so the two groups, whether they're liberal, conservative, Republican, Democrats, have to come together to discuss what and get on the same page. And we as people of African descent has to decide, you know, what do we want and come up with a plan that we want to go by and then to work with them. Okay? It cannot come from a group who oppressed you. The oppressor has no benefit to release you. So that's my thought.
So, listening to what you heard today, how do you suggest we move forward on your plan next step?
Okay, well, here's one thing I would suggest. They talked about people who have been incarcerated getting employment. Well, the first thing I would suggest is to understand that the 13th Amendment with the exception clause is created a system which makes it beneficial to incarcerate people, especially people of color. So, not saying that people shouldn't have to do time for something they did wrong, but what should happen is that once they are released, then their record, unless it's something very secretive, like working in the government somewhere at some high level, that should not be an issue for them because they have served their time. So they should not have to, that should not be an issue. Once they serve their time, they should be released, come home, and when they are, if they have some skill set or some opportunity to get skills if they don't have skills to be able to come back into society.
Well, what about training in jail?
Well, you know, at one point in time, we had that, and we had a governor that I believe it was 1989 who came along and said that they were no longer going to provide that kind of information, okay, and opportunity. So we have had, okay, we have had that opportunity at first, where men used to come out of prison with college degrees, okay, but they took that away in Virginia in 1989.
On that note, I want to say thank you.
You're welcome.
Danita. Ms. Charity, what are your thoughts on this evening?
It's just to share. It was awesome. It was very informative. It was very informative. And it also had community engagement on how to really just start the healing. And that's what we need, is we need to speak it out first and then see it come into focus and to put it into practice.
Now I know you are doing some things with the school, helping underprivileged, helping folks get jobs. This whole piece in terms of reparation, what does it mean to be able to do other than accepting money? How do we tackle this?
We tackle this by collaboration, networking with each other, and really to speak out and to not only just talk about it, but really put it into action. We have a lot of people talking, but there's
tangible benefits.
Very few people begin to really, as you say, tangible benefits is be able to provide services, sharing that talent, sharing, empowering them, give them empowerment. And not only giving them employment, but providing a network of helping each other instead of just tearing each other down. Just a few kind words can be able to change individual lives.
Now I heard one of the speakers speak on there were 450,000 poor people in Richmond, and now we have enough people out here where we can connect the churches with these people. How do we make that happen? How do we make that from an idea to something that we actually do?
First of all, we have to organize. We have to come together as a community and really see how each person can give that resource, how each person can be able to, because everybody has something that they can give. Even if they think they don't, they have something that they can be able to provide and to give. If it's no more than say, hey, I can be able to come and take you to your next job. I can be able to come and babysit your children. But you don't know if you don't ask. So if you don't ask for help, you can't get help. So the best thing is to, first of all, ask for it and then go in and apply to make it happen. Not only that, but even the individual who think they need help, they also can be the one of the individuals who can help. Just by sharing whatever they might have, instead of always saying, gimme, 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 you have to know how to give to someone else.
Okay. And on that note, I'll say thank you.
You're welcome.
Tell me about your thoughts on the event tonight, on coming to the table.
My thoughts on tonight, one of the main reasons I came is because they were going to talk about Prince Edward County. And I'm from Prince Edward County.
Were you one of the kids that were not in the school? I'm sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, I did miss all 5 years of public schools. I went back 1 year early because they had what they considered a free school. But no, I didn't go to school any of the years from 59 to 63. I was out of school.
What were you doing?
I worked on a farm for this white man. They paid me $2 a day. And I found out later on when I started doing things like protesting and asking for representation on our school board, you know, later on, and I found out he was one of the people on the school board that voted me out.
So you wouldn't go to school?
So I wouldn't go to school. But yet every time I went over to his farm to go to work, I would pass his sons down there waiting for the school bus.
Now, help me understand this. They wouldn't pay for black schools, or they just shut down all schools?
They shut down all public schools. But they took money from the public school budget and opened up a private school for whites only.
Lord have mercy.
He was my student.
Now, I need you to go walk in there with him and tell that story.
What story?
That story you just told, that he was your student?
Well, I wanted to focus on him. That's more important.
Yeah, but I need the two of you together. I just did him.
Yeah, would you do that? That would be really powerful.
Yeah.
What do you want?
Go ahead, just walk in there.
He'll ask
Walk
you.
in there. I'll ask the question.
Did you know Coleman Woodson?
Huh?
Did you know Coleman Woodson?
Now,
Coleman Woodson?
He moved to Goochland, but he was in your
now,
law school. But I have great stories about him.
Yeah.
all right, well, let me ask you this. Now, I see you two gentlemen. One saying he taught the other. How did this relationship start? Talk to me about that.
He was my teacher, and he was one of the few teachers that was actually concerned about the students more so than just coming to get a paycheck. He would do a whole lot of things, and he wasn't just my teacher, he was my advisor for the yearbook, you know. I was editor of that, and I was a headache to him then too.
You were never a headache.
If you look at...
Well, he was
Go ahead.
my teacher. I mean, the kid, and you're sort of symbolic of all of them, but, you know, I was 22, and we're like 4 years difference in age. They were almost the same age I was, because the schools had been closed. And I don't think I realized then how badly hurt they were, but they taught me a lot about they were so kind and accepting, just wonderful people. And it's hard to imagine how, you know, the whites there could do the damage they did.
How were you able to put up with it, tolerate it, understand what happened, being a white man yourself?
Well, I was so naive, I don't think I realized. I mean, for instance, I did the math, and if all of my students' parents had voted, they could have gotten, I don't know, one of those guys off the board of supervisors. But what I didn't understand, if they had gone out and voted like that, they might have lost their jobs. You know, it was a very, very different time then. Am I being clear with that?
Yes, but at the same time, for those who don't know, tell us a little bit about the times that he couldn't go to school, and you being a white man, and you feeling empathy for them, but you at the same time, you are in the minority.
Look here, I was an accidental teacher. I went to Hampton, Sydney. A good buddy of mine and I worked as tutor, started a little tutoring program. Mm-hmm. In fact, my first wife came in my classroom and called me Mr. Robinson. So my brother was a conscientious objector. I think that was a much bigger deal. I really admire him for that. But I thought if he was going to do that, then I needed to do something. And I was 4F because of asthma. And so I wrote to Prince Edward County, to Brian Harper, the superintendent, and asked for an application. He called the dean at Hampton Sydney and got a recommendation and sent me a contract. I never applied. It was just total happenstance. And so I had never been I had no training in education. I had an English degree from Hampton, Sydney, and I wasn't a stellar student. I somehow, I grew up here in Richmond. I was as much a racist as anybody. We never said nigger. We were very polite, we followed all the rules. And when people started having sit-ins, I couldn't understand it. It was like, why are you breaking these rules? And so I carried all that to Prince Edward with me, but I don't know.
Yeah, well,
I don't know where it went.
Well, that guy named Brian Hopper, he sent you that contract. You didn't even have to go to be interviewed.
Right. It was kind of crazy.
But lo and behold, a few years later, he fired your ass. He fired you when you started doing good things for us.
Right.
When he thought you were on the other side, he was all happy-go-lucky with it.
They wanted white teachers that would come in and take off on the weekends and go to North Carolina. Well, I lived in the other Hampton, Sydney, which is to say the black, all the serving people who worked at Hampton, Sydney. And I lived out on the Darlington Heights Road, and a couple guys, there's another guy here, and he and his buddies would come up and we'd go fishing and all that kind of stuff. And so I began to get to know the community.
A relationship started.
Yeah. It's all about really. I've taught in the Richmond Public Schools 20 years most recently. I will not be a substitute teacher because when you go in as a sub, you don't have any relationship. And that's as a teacher, that's the only thing I believe you have is a relationship.
Yeah. And, I was a junior, and that was the first time I ever wrote a paragraph. I could conjugate a verb and do all of that, but just to put it in
context,
and do it by paragraphs, I had never done that before. And he brought a partner with him, like you said, Mr. Bill Knuckles. He was my chemistry and physics teacher.
Yeah.
So, but with their help, I did graduate on time, even though I missed
5 years.
4 years out of school, 5 years out of public school.
But you were still able to graduate on time?
Graduated
with
on
their
time.
help.
I think we got to know each other because Leroy was the editor of the yearbook and I was the advisor. And we spent a lot of time together on that.
Yeah.
Wouldn't you say?
Yeah, we did that, and we had the meetings down at church with Reverend Griffin.
Oh, right.
So you had the student. How was the parents' interaction with?
After I was fired, the parents elected me president of the PTA. How about that?
Okay.
The parents and I were on good terms.
This is one of the things that's being said to me in terms of why they're having problems with the school today, and that there is not a relationship between the parent, the student, the teacher, and the pastor. Because the pastor and the parent will reinforce the information from the teacher. We don't have that today.
Throw out the SOLs and start teaching and develop relationships. It would turn everything around. I believe.
On that, I'll say thank you.
That was awesome. So
We're a good team, Leroy.
what year were you
May I?
in Sydney?
I graduated in '67.
So my brother, Will Frank, was 68. Did you know
Well, Frank, yes.
Yeah, he
Sure.
was kicked out of the dorm because he played his guitar too much, and so we let him come in until 11 at night.
Well, Frank, sure.
He would have been a year.
I remember him.
Yeah, he's from Martinsville. So. What
If you ever get in touch with the Moulton Museum,
Huh?
it's a black history museum.
I thought that was in Frederick.
No, this is for Prince Edward County.
We're gonna do a
Farmville.
Yeah.
I've been there. I went to Farmville. I was up there when.
You look so familiar.
I was up there with Reverend Barber. When Reverend Barber came to Buckingham County.
The guy from North Carolina.
Right. And I also went up to a lady by the name of Reverend Osborne. I went to some of the churches there
Is there any kind of
with the protests.
What's your name?
Clyde Bradley.
Yeah, I'm Burrow.
How you doing? Yeah, nice to meet you. So, what I would do is get with Reverend Osborne, but her family has land there. Still have land. And I've been to one of the churches and I've saw all the, at the cemetery, where you had the Osborne family and all of that there through the generations. But where are we at right now in the pipeline? It's dead. It's sitting on it.
No, he's coming into town this Friday at 11.
Right. Have they? I know Reverend Barber's not coming.
Yeah.
William the son is coming.
William
The son is
Barber
coming.
It's going to be here?
William Barber's not coming?
He's not coming. The son is coming. He had to go to court. I'm trying to find out the itinerary for that.
Well, Darren knows. Darren Utley knows. The
Well,
guy he's on that committee.
Okay.
So
The next gentleman at the museum, ask him about the real newspaper of Farmville.
It was a black guy that had the paper.
The Voice of Prince Edward County.
Yeah, isn't that a black guy that did that? He still run the paper?
No.
Is it you?
Is it Prince Edward?
I was an editor at one time.
So we're going to probably have a coming to the table field trip there this
I've
summer.
got, in fact, I've got a bunch of The Voice sitting on my dining room table right now. Somebody emailed me.
Well, see, we got some of the good articles, like when they closed the school and took our money.
Well, I will set it up. Give me your information.
Did you all
contact
sign
information.
your email so we can put you on the list?
He doesn't have an email address.
The
Do you have a
reason,
phone number? So
the
if we
reason
come there and fill
I
the
am
call.
hesitant about being on there is that I think
No.
I don't want it to be about the white people.
It's not. It's not.
I want
It's
it to
not.
be about them.
It's about how you were supportive helping them,
Right.
and how
But
you.
we tend
how
to
you
make
train.
white stuff,
No, not that.
you know,
see,
the star,
see,
and I don't wanna- I don't wanna do that.
understand that.
I'm real clear about that.
Okay, I do the narrative, and by me doing it, I'm doing the narrative from a black perspective.
Thanks.
All right, well, put a bag over my head, will you?
No, I'm not gonna do that. But I understand exactly what you're saying.
Yes.
Yeah,
And
I just think
that-
it's really important. It's not my story.
I understand that, and I'm gonna make that happen.
Okay.
Because I get some of those
Okay,
robocalls.
now,
I'll say that I'm.
let's,
I was really,
come on.
I have a few things to say about, not
Hey, I
about
really enjoyed you.
Prince Edward County, but about reparations.
Excuse me. Now, I'm gonna do yours a little different. Now,
'Cause
you
I'm
are,
white.
Sorry.
yeah, not only that, because you are related to Robert E. Lee
That's right.
and Stewart.
That's,
Now, I really want to know why you feel, or what your thoughts were this evening.
well, I've started this journey a long time ago, being told to be proud of Lee and Stewart. I lived on Plantation Road in Martinsville, but when we moved here and we wanted to buy a house in 1969 in the Caroline area, the agent said, well, you don't want to live there. And I said, well, why? And he said, because it's a changing neighborhood. And I didn't know what that meant. So I said, what is a changing neighborhood? And he explained that I would want to move because the values would drop and the grass would die and the crime would rise. And we bought a house anyway. And it was a changing neighborhood because it changed me. So that's the journey beginning in 1970 that I've come on to unpack the layers and layers and layers and layers. And I'm still not unpacked. You don't get rid of your whiteness and your supremacy, and you don't get rid of your privilege because it's there. But so tonight, it was nothing new for me because I've heard Ken and we've had the big discussions about it. But I thought tonight was, I was excited at how spellbound the audience was. I was pleased at how many men came because often it's the women that have these conversations. So I was pleased about that. I just feel like the audience really, really heard. And it's an important conversation. And the thing that struck me the most and that I is the need for apology. I remember Henry Marsh's brother Harold was my neighbor. He was one of my mentors. He and Albert Lambert, and they were both neighbors. And so when Harold had been shot, but I would follow Henry and what he was doing in the Senate, And he was trying so hard to get the state to acknowledge and apologize for slavery. And this was in 2004, and the state wouldn't do it, and the state wouldn't do it. And so I remember going to Six Mount Zion I had to give a thing, and it was like God said, you've got to, I said, you know, I kept thinking, what am I going to say? And he said, get up and apologize. And that was a powerful moment in my life and my journey, because, you know, when you're always right, and you're on the right side, and you're always white, you're not used to saying you're sorry. But I'm also more afraid of God than I am of that feeling. So I did, and the freedom and the release from that moment of standing up in front of Six Mount Zion and saying, I know our state hasn't been able to apologize, but I can personally. I apologize for slavery, the enslavement, and the subsequent sins of my ancestors, and I ask your forgiveness. So that changed my life, and I resonate so much with the vision that Ken put forward of the vision of the light in DC, and of the apology going around, and of the public apology spoken from the Oval Office. And it's something yearly we would speak that apology, not just look at the words of Abraham Lincoln about healing, but we look at the truth of what it is that we ask people to get over.
If you look at your pedigree, your background, and bring me up to the president and his actions and his thoughts, what would you say? What would other people like you need to do to make that transition? Am I making sense?
To be like him or like me?
Be like you.
Oh. Okay, so I don't really like to mention the name of the current president because he didn't need any more airtime. As for me, the journey was because the agent said, you don't want to live there and move there anyway. And I was afraid the first night because we moved in and he brought us flowers and he said, you're going to lose, but you'll probably be able to get your money out. And I said, what do you mean? He said, in 5 years, you're going to want to get out of here. And that night, I first divided the house into 3 apartments, and then I imagined how it would, because it was all our money was in the house. And I started meeting the neighbors, and so it's when you meet people. It's when you meet people, and people, as I say, like Harold Marsh and Albert Lambert and Imogene Draper, it's a relationship that changes people, and developing community and doing things together. So we lived there 45 years. We only moved because I got too old to keep the house up. But every relationship can change us in one direction or another. And I find any person of African descent who's willing to be my friend, I'm changed because of them. Danita's just continually continually tumbling together, sort of like, diamonds being polished. I go in with all these rough edges, and because of reality and truth, we become friends, and also more like the truth, light of truth. So, but being willing to apologize was a huge turning moment, because us white folks have a hardness, and I think we develop it. This is my theory. I think it's developed in part by, deep down, we know the sin of enslavement. We know our sins. And when you messed up, you don't want to let your parents know that you messed up. And so we don't want to talk about what we messed up. And so we developed this shell. And so doing things, meeting people who knock on the shell, and then taking action to say, I messed up, I was wrong, we were wrong. That is a big crack in the shell, and that's when the real relationships start. But I don't think a white person ever escapes the plantation. It's just a journey. I mean, I lived on Plantation Road. I can think, I'm healed and wrote. Well, no, you always find, where did this come from? You know,
Okay.
and you try, but you keep on pushing, and you're further along towards Canada than you were.
Thank you.
We have to go.